It's the preview show. It's the No Nay Never podcast.
Hello and welcome to the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Bromley, but joining me as ever is the main man himself, the headliner of the preview show. It is, of course, Dave Statman Robert! Yay! Dave, hello.
Hello, Natalie. Hello, listeners.
Back so soon after a very short break between previous shows this week, because, of course, we've got a midweek fixture, so we're back on the airwaves again. Our listeners will be treated to some delights, won't they, having us again twice in 1 week?
They're coming thick and fast, yeah. Obviously, midweek game. Liverpool should have been Saturday originally. Leeds should have been the previous Tuesday. All the games from this weekend have been moved into midweek, so we can have some fans there for both of the last two games, home and away. Well, the home fans were there for the home game. We won't have any away fans at Sheffield United. But yes, we've got something to look forward to on Wednesday evening, or at least some of us do.
We do, and Dave, I am very excited to announce that both of us will be there, won't we?
We're going to do some recordings, I think, aren't we?
We are.
Of that.
I think so. I think that's exciting. Actually, it turned out that the odds were pretty nice anyway at the end of it, weren't they? It didn't work out it being just under or just over 3-1, did it? It ended up being probably about a 70% chance of getting through, actually, in the end, wasn't it? Because of only about 5,000 fans applied, apparently. So
yeah, I think there was about 10,000 who were eligible. Around 10,000 were eligible, and then obviously with it being midweek, people coming from distance away or didn't want to go, then the numbers who applied were lower. So it's the odds were stacked slightly better in the favour of those who did apply.
Yeah, definitely. Have you recovered after the weekend's fixture yet, Dave? That was a little bit painful.
It was disappointing. Yeah, I mean, Leeds doing the double over us, and certainly the manner they did it with the goals in the second half. I mean, the score line perhaps wasn't a true reflection of the game in terms of the chances Burnley had. I mean, we had a really good chance, didn't we, where Matty Vidra went through and, it's kind of a good save. It flicked off Mellier's leg, didn't it? Went out for a corner. If that had gone in early in the second half, that might have been a different game. But Leeds were very clinical. I think that was the difference between the two teams. They were very clinical in the final third, and Burnley unfortunately weren't.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit difficult, really, because I don't think I'm going to be too hard on them in that the job's been done. They've put in a phenomenal amount of work this season, so I forgive them being able to just sit and have a bit of a chill because why wouldn't we give them that opportunity? But yeah, it's always disappointing to have such a heavy defeat, especially when they're a side that didn't have anything to play for either. It just feels a bit like you wanted to have a bit of a freedom performance, didn't we? But was not to be. But on to the next one, and we've got another tricky fixture coming up this midweek as well, which is going to probably end up being quite painful as well. But before we get on to that, Dave, we have, of course, got a quiz question that we need to reveal an answer for. Now, at the end of the last preview show, which was, of course, Leeds United at home, we posed this quiz question, which was: Sean Dyche has been manager for 3 Burnley home wins over Leeds United in the Championship at Turf Moor. Scott Arfield scored the winning goal in 2 of these games, but which Burnley player scored the winner in the other game? What was the correct answer, Dave?
Well, it wasn't Danny Ings, for whoever guessed that. Natalie. The correct answer was Charlie Austin. It was Charlie Austin. He scored in a 1-0 win, you may remember. That was actually Sean Dyche's second game in charge of Burnley, way back in November 2012. Seems such a long time ago, but that was the other winning goal, Charlie Austin.
Excellent. Do we have any correct answers this week from our listeners?
We had a few, yes. We had Adam Dennett knew the correct answer, as did Adrian Caton, as did John Robertson, and also David Entwistle. So all 4 of them knew and remembered that it was Charlie Austin.
Good stuff. Well, of course, we are going to have another quiz question for you to ponder at the end of this show, so do stay tuned.
Opposition stats.
But in the meantime, Dave, of course, we've got a game that we have to preview. It is, of course, Liverpool at home, Wednesday the 19th of May. 8:15, live on Sky Sports, in front of fans at Turf Moor. Dave, why don't you kick us off with recent history about this fixture, please?
Yeah, well, Liverpool have visited Turf Moor in each of Burnley's 6 previous Premier League seasons. And apart from one Burnley victory, that was in the 2016-17 season, which we will be highlighting in a little more detail very soon, all of the other 5 games have ended in victory for the visitors from Merseyside. For every other match this season, we've followed our recent history section by picking out a particular highlight and a lowlight. But on this occasion, rather than doing that, we're just going to run through the defeats in the Premier League era instead of having a specific lowlight.
Ooh.
Highlights and lowlights.
So starting with those recent defeats, it was 4-0 to the visitors when they came to Turf Moor in our first Premier League campaign. Match was 0-0 at half-time, but the floodgates opened in the second half. Liverpool scored 4. Steven Gerrard got a couple. And this confirmed our relegation back to the Championship in April 2010. It's been on the cards for a while, but the defeat against Liverpool confirmed it. However, when we next got a chance, that was in the 2014-15 season, the scoreline was a lot closer. That match took place on Boxing Day 2014, and it took a Raheem Sterling goal, probably against a run of play, to give the visitors the narrowest of wins. Next up was Burnley's win in 2016-17, but that was followed by another run of 3 home defeats in the last 3 seasons. The margin of victories increased in each of those 3 most recent defeats, going from a 2-1 defeat, then 3-1, and then it was 3-0 in the corresponding fixture last season.
Excellent. Well, why don't you move us on to that highlight and lowlight section then, Dave? And, it's going to be just a highlight then, I guess.
It is, yeah, and the highlight picked itself in some ways, really. The second half of the 2015-16 season saw Burnley go 23 undefeated on the way to the Championship title. Although this run ended and came to a very abrupt end, really, after a defeat to Swansea City on the opening day of the 2016-17 Premier League season at Turf Moor, our second Premier League game of that season was also at home, as we'd agreed to switch it from Anfield due to ground development work there, which had overrun. And what a match at Turf Moor it proved to be. An early opener from Sam Vokes, after just 2 minutes, was followed up by another goal before half-time from Andre Gray, and Burnley held on to this lead to ensure a memorable victory. Despite Liverpool racking up just over 80% of the possession, they were restricted mainly to long-range pot shots, most of them from the wayward Philippe Coutinho, who seemed to be able to send the ball way high into the stands from wherever he decided to shoot. For a bright moment among several recent disappointments at home against Liverpool, this was certainly a recent highlight for Burnley fans.
Excellent indeed, it was.
Fixture Flashback.
Well, let's move on then, Dave, to our first of our, it's getting towards the end of the season now, our first of our new features for the second half of the season, which is, of course, the Fixture Flashback, which is, of course, our listeners' chance to get involved on the previous show each week. Dave, take it away. Do we have anybody this week? What's going on?
We have, yes, we do have another recording for you, and here it is.
For the last home game of the season, I've chosen a Boxing Day cracker from 1973. At the time, both Burnley and Liverpool were hot on the heels of league leaders Leeds United, so a close game was expected. The Clarets started brightly, and a trademark Leighton James cross gave Paul Fletcher the chance to put Burnley ahead, beating Ray Clements with a great header. That's how it stayed up to half-time, but after the interval, Liverpool took control, with the outstanding Kevin Keegan giving the Burnley defence a torrid time. Eventually, Keegan won himself a penalty, but in his haste to take it, he placed the ball wide of the goal. Undeterred, the Reds finally equalised 5 minutes from the end. But from the resulting kick-off, the Clarets created a rare chance of their own. The ball fell invitingly to Ray Hankin, just 6 yards from goal. We, in the long side, craned our necks towards the cricket field end in anticipation. But Hankin completely mishit the ball, and it bobbled slowly forwards. However, Clements was wrong-footed, and a defender tried to make a desperate goal line clearance. I never actually saw the ball hit the back of the net, but the roar around the stadium told me all I needed to know.
And thanks again to Jan for his memory of a fantastic Burnley win from the 1970s. A repeat of that on Wednesday evening will be very welcome indeed. This season, we've been able to bring you a preview show for every single Premier League game. Quite an achievement, I think. So that just leaves us with one more game we've got left to preview, and that's our trip to play the already relegated Sheffield United at Bramall Lane. So if you have any memories of this fixture from years past, then please get in touch to ensure that your contribution can be heard. You can direct messages on Twitter, that's at NoNayNever, or send an email to podcast@noNayNever.net. And although we're more than happy to read out written submissions, we do enjoy hearing the recordings. We've mentioned it several times, but the easiest website to use to record your thoughts and send us an audio link is vocaroo.com, VOCAROO.com, which is free to use, no registration required, really easy, and most of the people who've been in touch with us have used that so far this season. So we'd really like to hear one or maybe more for our next match, our last match of the season.
We certainly would. It would be very nice if we could sneak one more in there as well. And unfortunately, we did ask this a couple of weeks ago, but Statman Dave has decided to get very strict on us and won't let us use the Wembley playoff as a fixture away, even though technically we weren't at Turf Moor. So, but I say, let's ignore Statman Dave. And if you do have a memory of playing Sheffield United at Wembley, then send it in, because that would be very nice too.
Heroes and villains.
Moving on then, Dave, to my favourite section of the preview show, and that is, of course, the heroes and villains section. Let's kick us off with who you've picked, please, as our hero.
Well, yeah, we've already featured Burnley's most recent home win over Liverpool as our highlight this week, so we're going to have to go back a little bit further in time for our hero for this episode. Until recently, our paths haven't met that often over the last 40 years, but during that time, Burnley wins have been relatively rare, and tempting as it was to choose the goal scorer from our FA Cup third round win in 2005, when Reds defender Jimmy Traore put through his own net with a bizarre backheeled own goal to give Burnley the win, we've selected a Burnley player from the 1980s as our hero for this episode. Prior to 2005, that FA Cup win we just mentioned, our next most recent win at Turf Moor was back in 1983. Burnley had travelled to Anfield for the first leg of the Milk Cup semi-final, and despite a couple of really good chances for Derek Scott, the home side took advantage and won the game 3-0, seemingly putting the tie beyond doubt. However, back on home soil, the Clarets put up a good fight and won the second leg 1-0, with Derek Scott scoring the goal. So although he missed a couple of golden chances in the first leg at Anfield, which does have a tendency to be remembered more, Derek Scott is our hero this week for scoring the only goal in the second leg.
Good choice for hero, Dave. Like it very much. Well, who have you picked then on the flip side as the villain?
Right, well, yes, I think this will be a popular one. When Project Big Picture reared its ugly head last October, the main ringleaders, along with the Glazer family, who own Manchester United, were Liverpool's owners, Fenway Sports Group, fronted by co-founder John W. Henry. Although that attempted power grab failed, the equally ludicrous European Super League plan also had the grubby fingerprints of FSG's John W. Henry all over it. We're still waiting to hear confirmation of what action the Premier League will take against those 6 clubs, but the punishment, either in terms of fines or indeed in addition to other sanctions, should reflect the severity of the reckless actions that were being proposed, even if the backlash from the rest of football ensured that the harebrained scheme never got off the ground. Despite a 2-minute video apology from Henry himself, only a fool would believe that this is the end of it and there will be no further attempts to try and increase the power of a handful of clubs at the expense of everyone else. So, for his major role in trying to destroy English football, John W. Henry is our villain this week, and if you're fortunate enough to be at Turf Moor on Wednesday evening, then remember to voice your displeasure if he dares to show his face.
Well said, Dave. Well said. Finally then, who's going to be our referee? Who's going to be looking over the game?
We've got Manchester's Chris Kavanagh. He's got the whistle for the match against Liverpool on Wednesday evening. He's one of the less experienced referees on the select group list. The first Burnley match he took charge of was the 3-1 away win at Brentford in January 2016. but for his other 10 Burnley games, they've all been in the Premier League. As well as being in the middle for our 1-0 win over Sheffield United at Turf Moor at the end of December, he was also in charge of our 1-0 defeat against West Ham United at the London Stadium in January. He's refereed this fixture once before, and that was at the end of August 2019. That was, early on last season, wasn't it? When Liverpool came to Turf Moor and won 3-0. In terms of the VAR, Paul Tierney, he's been dispatched to Stockley Park for this game, and call me a cynic, but I expect he'll be doing his utmost to defend the decisions of his colleagues at Turf Moor.
I shall call you a cynic, but that does not necessarily mean that you are not accurate as well, Dave.
Statman Dave's Stat of the Week.
Well, I know you're not going to leave it there because I know you like to treat our listeners, and there's not that many more opportunities this season to be able to do it. So why don't you delve deep into those pockets and let our listeners have your miscellaneous Stat of the Week.
Okay, well, this week's stat relates to Burnley's recent home form, or should I say, the lack of it. Since coming from behind to beat Aston Villa 3-2 back in January, we've played 9 Premier League games at Turf Moor without a single victory. A defeat to Manchester City at Turf Moor at the start of February was followed by a run of 5 consecutive home draws. But since then, Newcastle, West Ham and Leeds have all come away from Turf Moor with all 3 points, leaving us with an unenviable run of home results. Looking back for similar poor runs, even our run of 18 league matches without a win in 2006-07 only included 7 home games and 11 away games. Back in 1998-99, that was Stan Ternant's first season in charge, we endured a similar 9-match run at home without a win in the league between December 1998 and March 1999, before a 4-3 win over Macclesfield Town broke the streak. Prior to this season, the worst home run without a home victory in the top flight was 8, which happened in the 1970-71 season and ended in relegation. But this has been no normal season, and even Liverpool suffered 6 consecutive home defeats in the league after being unbeaten in their previous 68 home league games at Anfield. Much has been made of the lack of supporters at matches this season, and so hopefully the 3,500 Burnley fans at Turf Moor this Wednesday can inspire the team to a much-needed home win, which would also ensure a first league double over Liverpool since 1929-30 season.
That is a good Stat of the Week. Very good, Dave. I can't believe we're coming to the end of the season and we've given you so many stats and things, but I can't believe we're nearly there. Well, before Dave and I give our thoughts ahead of that Liverpool game at the weekend, midweek, we do have an opposition view for you. We spoke to Henry Jackson from This Is Anfield to get his thoughts ahead of the game.
Opposition view.
It's been a crazy season for Liverpool. I think everyone knows that. When you look back to September and they won their first 3 games, and I think many people thought they would go on to win another league title, then the Van Dijk injury happened and that changed everything. It was the defining moment of the season for me, and it's shown why he's the most influential player in the league. On top of that, they've then lost Gomez and Matip, which means they've had to make do without their 3 best centre-backs for many months, which is almost impossible in terms of a title defence or even a top 4 finish. Playing Nat Phillips and Reece Williams there's only so much you can do. They're limited as players. And then obviously Fabinho and Henderson have also had to slot in at times. So it's been a disaster of a season in terms of VAR calls also going against them and no fans in stadiums. It does feel a little as though the footballing gods are punishing them for enjoying last season's title success and giving them this horrendous season to follow it up. Having said that, there is now a feeling that they can salvage it. If they just win their last 2 games, a top 4 finish should be secured. Obviously, with Sunday's incredible late win against West Brom, with Alisson's goal probably up there with the most dramatic moments I've ever seen as a Liverpool fan, it's just given them a real chance. And I am expecting Burnley and Palace to both give them tough games. I think it's easy to look at it and assume that they've both got nothing to play for, which is true to an extent. But I think certainly in Burnley's case, you look at the game with 3,500 fans back. I think Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes will be licking their lips at the prospect of facing Williams and Phillips, because physically I really do think they have the beating of them, especially Williams. So there is still this feeling that basically the whole season will be defined by this next week. And if they do end up finishing the top 4, I think it will be a phenomenal effort by Klopp and the players, because there really was a point a few weeks back when it looked impossible, and they've dug deep and somehow kept it alive. and it's now just a case of really getting over the finish line by any means necessary. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think the next 2 games are going to have nerve-shredding moments, just as the West Brom game did. But I do expect them to end up getting over the line and, well, securing for me something that would be, at the start of the season, deemed a failure. But because of everything that's happened, it would have to be a success. So it's not a season that I don't think any Liverpool fan will look back on fondly. It's been horrible, and from a fan's perspective, empty stadiums have made for a very sterile style of football, and you found yourself switching off from certain games that you would normally watch as a neutral fan. But hopefully back in August that returns to normal, and I'm thoroughly looking forward to seeing fans back in Turf Moor on Wednesday night.
So, tough one, Dave. Not helped by a last gasp winner that Liverpool, Alisson, did today against West Brom, because they've now very much got something to fight for on Wednesday. I was a little bit disappointed by that, but the current Mr. Brom is quite excited about that because he wants to see a game that's got something riding on it. He didn't want a lame duck of a game that's got nothing left to play for. But it's going to be a tough ask now on Wednesday with Liverpool knowing that they need to win to be able to get that top 4 slot.
I think it would have been tough anyway. We know that Liverpool they did struggle today a little bit against West Brom, whereas you'd have thought they might have been pushovers. They certainly weren't. And Liverpool's always a tough game, whether you're home or away. And we know that the home or away difference has made less of a difference this season. There's been very little difference between teams' home and away form. So from that perspective, it was always going to be a toughie. We're coming off the back of a heavy defeat and also a poor home run. I'm just hoping and putting some hope really in the fact that they will have fans there at Turf Moor.
Yeah.
That might just make a little bit of a difference. I think that we want to definitely be the 12th person on Wednesday evening and make sure that we can get behind. I mean, there's only 3,500 was there. We want to make the noise of 20,000. So you've got to be 6 times as loud as you otherwise would be to make sure we do that. Yeah,
definitely. And that's such a good job, isn't it? You think that the players are going to want to put on a show for the fans. We've gone 15 months without seeing any live football, and this will be our only opportunity in an entire season to see it. So you'd think they'd want to perform for us and give us something to cheer about. With that in mind then, do you think there's any chance that we can get anything from this game? Do you want to give us a score prediction?
I think it's going to be tough to predict a win. I think it's maybe more likely to be a draw.
Oh, well, there's a surprise. I love you.
Heart and head. So, my heart says maybe we could get a win, but head's coming back to a draw. So I'm going to say a 1-1 draw. Go with my head.
Yeah, I think I quite like that. I quite like a 1-1 draw. I feel like we're going to go ahead because we tend to always go ahead first against Liverpool, and I feel like it might just be a bit too much for us, and they might just score an equaliser towards the end. I feel like that's what it's going to be. I'm going to say 1-1, and I'm going to say Matty Vidra goal. Who do you think is going to score?
Chris Wood.
Oh, see, look at that. Well, listeners, why don't you let us know a header? Ooh, we're getting type of goal now as well. First half or second half?
Second.
Ooh, this is exciting. I'm going to go
from a corner.
I'm going to say Matty Vidra really early on, capitalising on a defensive mistake somewhere and a really nice one-on-one with a keeper and into the back of the net. That's what I'm going to say. Well, listeners, we want to hear from you ahead of the game. We want to know what you think the score will be. We want to know who you think is going to score the goals and how they're going to score them, please. You can get in touch with us by tweeting us at NoNayNever, or you can email us at podcast@nonaynever.net. But however you get in touch, let us know what you think the game's going to be on Wednesday. And if you're one of the lucky few who've got tickets, drop us a line. Let us know. Share your excitement for the game. We want to hear from you on Wednesday. We want to see people's pre-match build-up. We want to see all those lovely little, what's the word? What is it? They call pre-match. What's it called? It's not build-up. Routines, I guess. Pre-match routines. Got made a meal of that day. Pre-match routines. We want to hear all about them. So do get in touch. Have we got any injury news or any other team headaches ahead of that game on Wednesday, Dave? I suppose we don't really know yet, do we? It'll be in a couple of days.
Well, we do know a little bit more. When we did the previous preview show, we weren't aware of the situation with Phil Bardsley. He's out for the season. He's taken the chance to have a hernia operation. That's been done, so he's, I think, ruled out for the rest of the season. And as we know, Nick Pope was a doubt and he didn't play. Bearing that in mind, I think it might be unlikely he's going to be back for Wednesday, so it might be Bailey Peacock-Farrell in goal again on Wednesday evening.
Pharrell Williams, Dave, come on, get it right. Okay, well that's exciting enough. I think we'll still be able to put a relatively strong side out, and I just wouldn't be risking Pope now. We may as well just leave him out for the rest of the season, because the worst thing we want to do is scupper his plans for the Euros if he ends up getting to go there. So I'd happily leave Pope out now. There you go. Exciting. And we're going to be there, Dave. We're going to be there.
Fantasy Premier League update.
Okay, second half of the previous show, and we are, of course, counting down now to the grand finale of the No Nay Never Fantasy Premier League. Dave, it's getting to the business end of the season. What is going on, please? Do we have a game week to report on and I guess progress?
It's getting exciting, yeah. I mean, there was quite a short window between the games that were played for last week, which was game week 35. They went through from the weekend and right up until Thursday. When we did the recording for the last preview show for Leeds, we didn't have a table update, which is why we had Sean on as our guest for that one, our current leader. But there was just a window between the games finishing on Thursday, the FPL updating all their information on the Friday, and then the game starting again on Friday. So fortunately, I did take a snapshot of the table at that point. I've got our top 7, and we've got the Kings of Game Week 35 to go through as well. So if you'd like me to go through those, we've got our magnificent 7, I'm going to call them. All our top 7 managers were all non-movers.
Oh.
And they were in reverse order. We had Charlie Binns in 7th place on 2,264 points. In 6th place, Joseph Golby, 2,279. Another 20-point jump to Gary Proctor in 5th on 2,299. And then it starts getting tight. We've got Ursay in 4th place on 2,301. Chris Stanworth in 3rd on 2,302. Adam Dennett, who we've also had on as a guest this season, is in 2nd place on 2,311, but still out in front, a lead of 25 points. Sean Danaher is still our current leader, 25 points ahead, with 3 game weeks, isn't it? Because we've got the game week that's still in progress now. We've got the midweek games, and then we've got the following Sunday's games. They're all obviously kicking off at the same time on the last day of the season.
Indeed, I enjoyed having Sean on last week. I thought he did a really good job of his piece. Yeah, it was really good to see him. How's Team No Nay Never doing?
Well, as it's so close between you and I, Natalie, for who's going to finish highest, I'm going to defer that update until the end of the season, just to build the suspense. But I can tell you that I did close the gap slightly on Richard Steele, who's still out in front of our podcast as Mini League. Although, the one good thing about FPL is you can go on and see other people's teams. And I looked on there, and he still had Bruno Fernandes as his captain. And he wasn't playing this week, so that might have affected his scores for this week.
Yeah,
so I'm hopeful of maybe trying to catch up again and maybe finishing top of our podcasters league. You never know.
Well, unless I do. I mean...
Or you, yes, whichever, yeah.
Definitely. What about... Let's stop with this nonsense. What about Kings of Game Week 35 then, please? 36, 35? 35.
35, yeah. If you'd have had all 11 players, I'm going to read out now, you would have got 180 points, and it was in a 3-5-2 formation. So we had Jordan Pickford in goal. We had a back 3 of Godfrey of Everton, Alexander Arnold of Liverpool, and Luca Digne of Everton as well. 2 Everton defenders and Everton goalkeeper. They obviously had a good week. Our midfield 5 was Smith Rowe of Arsenal, Greenwood and Fernandes of Manchester United, Eze of Crystal Palace, and Mark Albrighton of Leicester. And the front 2 were Firmino and Benteke, Liverpool's Firmino and Crystal Palace Benteke. So that was the 11 180 points, but there were a lot of teams in there who had 2 game weeks, and quite a few, Manchester United, had 3, although there weren't too many Manchester United players who actually played all 3 of the games because they were sort of all so close together. So that kind of comes into the tactics as well. It's difficult to make the most of the double and triple game weeks.
Yeah, same. I have that problem all the time, Dave. Well, moving on then to the second of our second half of the season fixture, and that is, of course, our opposition 3 to watch, where, Dave, you pick 3 players from our opposition who are the players to look out for based on their Fantasy Premier League points. So, take it away.
Well, this is excluding the game played today, so this is up to the end of game week 35. The highest scoring player for Liverpool, perhaps people won't be too surprised to hear that Mo Salah's out in front. He's got 212 points. He's obviously joint top scorer in terms of goals with Harry Kane in the league. He's got 212 in the FPL points. Second place is Sadio Mane with 149, and then just behind him is Trent Alexander-Arnold with 143 points. And with Liverpool's heavy match schedule, they've obviously got one less day to recover for Wednesday than we've had. We'll have to wait and see if any or all of these players will face us on Wednesday. Although, as you say, with all to play for, I'm suspecting that Liverpool are going to put out their strongest team. Yeah,
definitely. They've got to win on Wednesday if they've got any chance of. I mean, I think if they win the final 2 games, they probably will get that top 4 spot, won't they? But yeah, there's definitely a suggestion that they are going to put out a full strength team and try and win that game. So we shall see. We shall see, Dave. Now, I think that's everything, isn't it, in terms of a roundup for the FPL? I don't think there's anything else, is there?
Yeah, that's all we've got. But obviously, we do have the games coming thick and fast. So by the time we do the Sheffield United preview, we probably won't have an update for the midweek games. We'll certainly have an update from the games that have been played this weekend. So by the time we do, well, we won't have another preview show after that. But I think what we'll plan to do is maybe have a final show which combines the FPL. We'll give an update on that, maybe get our champion on, and then we've also got some plans for awards, haven't we, for the end of the season?
We do. We've got an awards show at the end of the season, which is the No and Never Alternative End of Season Awards show, which is always quite hilarious. I think plans are already in place for that. We're also thinking about an actual quiz of the year, aren't we? We're planning on doing something with an end of season quiz, if I remember right.
That was one of the possibilities over the summer, yes. So we'll be possibly looking at that if we can get some interest from perhaps some of our regular quizzes.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Do a quiz.
A champion of champions from our, the regular quiz answers this season. So we can get them all on and see who we can get to win. That would be very exciting.
See who really uses Google and who doesn't.
Yeah, and I think I know what the answer to that will be.
Statman Dave's quiz question.
Excellent. Well, before we leave our listeners, Dave, we have the small matter of a quiz question, which we're going to leave with our listeners with, please. Speaking of quizzes, so what have you decided to set our listeners this week?
Okay, well, this week's quiz question is: prior to the Premier League era, who was the last Burnley player to score a winning goal in a home league win over Liverpool?
Oh, I bet that's going back a bit. God, I wouldn't even know where to start with that one, Dave. That is a God. I'm sorry, listeners. I went half asleep then at the same time I did that. You can tell we're recording the previous show late at night, aren't we? Dave, I don't know where to start with that one, but I imagine that's going back a little bit. Tell our listeners, please, how they submit their answers, correct or otherwise.
Yeah, please do get in touch. You can tweet us or preferably send a direct message on Twitter. That means that no one else sees your answer. That's at @NoNayNever on Twitter. You can email us podcast@nonaynever.net, or you can also reply to the post for this preview show, which go up on either the No Nay Never Facebook page or on YouTube. And we'll be able to reveal the correct answer at the start of the next preview show, which we'll be doing for Sheffield United. That's probably going to be coming out on Friday, I think.
Yeah, I would have thought so. God, I can't believe how close we are. Any other business, any community news or anything else that we need to alert our listeners to, Dave?
I've got nothing else to add other than obviously we know the final game of the season. That's been fixed for some time in terms of the kickoff. That is a 4 p.m. kickoff on Sunday the 23rd away at Sheffield United. And as we said earlier in the show, we would like to hear any memories people have got from that game, so we can feature them on our next preview show. But I think no, nothing else to add from me.
No, nothing else from me either. So I think that is all we've got time for. My thanks as ever go to everyone who's contributed to this week's preview show, to Jan for this week's match day memories, for the fixture flashback feature, to Henry Jackson from This Is Anfield for his opposition view, to Turf Moor Stadium announcer Dominic Walker for his specially recorded preview show announcements, to producer Matt for knitting all of this together and getting it out there. But my final thanks as ever go to Statman Dave for just the phenomenal amount of work he does in putting the preview show together. It's all of his work, it's all of his genius, and we are very, very, very lucky to have him. As Dave said, we will be back on next Friday night for the final preview show of the season. And the rest of the team will be back probably, I think, Thursday, maybe Friday of this week to do an analysis show following that loss at home to Leeds on Saturday, and see what happens in the Liverpool result as well. So we'll have some sort of analysis show as we build up to the end of the season and the summer vacation. In the meantime, stay safe, take care of yourselves, take care of others. If anyone's feeling particularly lonely at this time of year, please do get in touch. The No Nay Never lines are always open. We can talk football, we can talk Clarets, we can talk whatever you want, really. You can tweet us at No Nay Never, or you can drop us an email at podcast@nonaynever.net, and we will always be there to respond to your queries and your general chit chat. That's everything we've got time for. I've been Natalie Bromley. This has been the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time.